My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Atheists, agnostics, long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Northern Kentucky University political scientist Michael Baranowski. My guest today is Mike Nellis, a Democratic strategist and former senior advisor to Kamala Harris. Mr. Nellis is the founder and chief strategy officer at Authentic, a digital marketing agency that's raised over $1 billion and in 2024 had a 77% client win rate. More recently, Mr. Nellis launched Quiller AI, a platform that's revolutionizing online fundraising for the Democratic Party. Mike Nellis, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I thought we'd start with Authentic. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you ended up starting a political marketing agency and what exactly Authentic does.
Sure. So I've been in Democratic politics for 2 decades now. I dropped out of college to go work for Barack Obama in 2007 in the Iowa caucus. And when I say work, it implies that I got a paycheck, but I was actually an unpaid fellow. So I was basically an intern sleeping on a couch. I mean, just trying to be close to the action. And I got into the online fundraising aspect of it when I finally got my first paying job, which was as a finance assistant on a Senate race back in Nebraska where I grew up. And we were at an all-staff meeting. My job was effectively to make sure that the candidate was making their phone calls to rich donors. And I had to make sure that he had his chew and his lunch and stuff like that. And I absolutely hated the job. I was not well suited for it. And we were at a staff meeting and somebody was like, hey, Barack Obama's raising a lot of money online with this email program. Does anybody want to try to figure out how to do that? And I was like 18. I threw up my hand. I was like, I'll figure it out. I got it. And we figured it out. And I forget exactly what we raised, but it was like a couple $100,000. And at the time, it was one of the first Senate races that had ever done that. And I looked like a genius when really what I was doing was emulating a lot of tactics I saw from direct mail vendors and emulating a lot of tactics I saw from the Obama campaign. But I sort of naturally, because of my age, because of the opportunity that had been given to me, I became one of the first really early people who took digital fundraising seriously. And the following election cycle in 2010, I worked for a woman named Elaine Marshall, who is the Secretary of State in North Carolina. She ran for Senate, and we raised like $1.2 or $1.5 million online, which at the time was the most amount of money a Senate race had won. And I managed to parlay that career into being the vice president of a large agency in DC that did Bernie Sanders' online fundraising in 2016. So I got to be a part of that. I've been really learned how to do it at a grand national scale after doing it, sort of like more rinky dink. And after 2016, because Bernie raised so much money, the industry started to take online fundraising really seriously. And a couple of years later, I founded Authentic, which is the company that I've had for the last 8 years now. It's the longest job I've ever had now, which is kind of incredible. And, our idea here is twofold. Like one, a lot of the way that political organizations are run and operated is they do a really poor job taking care of their team. They do a bad job of giving their staff proper pay and proper benefits. We want to try to do that right and build a team that we can be proud of. And then the second half of that is most digital fundraising programs are really poorly run. I mean, they treat people like ATM machines. They treat them with a great deal of disrespect. They send scammy, crappy fundraising emails and texts. And we're not going to do that. We're going to tell, authentic, narrative-driven stories that resonate with people. And when you get an email from some of our largest clients, like Adam Schiff or Cory Booker or Gretchen Whitmer, you're getting an email that's unique to them. You're getting an email that you're looking forward to read, that's building a connection between the individual at home and the candidate. And I think that leads to more donations. I think we've proven that by raising over $1 billion over the last however many years it's been.
And so, as you said, you've been doing this for a while now at the highest levels. And so I expect you've seen more than a few changes in how political campaigning, political fundraising has changed over that period.
Yeah, I've seen a ton. I've seen it become a very messy industry where nobody really knew what to do, to getting to a point now where there's, there's dozens of digital fundraising firms or dozens of firms that say that they do digital fundraising. I think there's really like 4 firms in the space that do an amazing job. My firm is one of them that do it at a high level where you can bring us in for a Senate race where we've got to raise, $100 million to win a Senate seat in Wisconsin, right? Like we did last cycle with Tammy Baldwin. My close friend, Tim Tagaris, runs Aisle 518. He and I worked together at our last company. And he does like Mark Kelly and Bernie Sanders, a bunch of others. Like he does an amazing job. And now we're in this spot where you kind of have a lot of options. And then there's a professionalism aspect of this because it's gotten harder to deliver emails. Back in, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if you got a list of, 250,000 email addresses, which was pretty common for somebody to do something they shouldn't do, but like grab a list out of the voter file, download it, upload it to their CRM, and then send an email, you could do that and just sort of see what would stick. Now, if you do that, you get tagged as a spammer because there's so many bad faith actors on the Republican and the Democratic side who have kind of ruined everything for everybody else. And so email deliverability and the way we grow our list has to be taken really seriously. So it requires a more technical, efficient approach to how you run it. Whereas before you kind of stick a square peg through a round hole and figure out what works. In this case, you got to be really thoughtful and intentional about it. And then I'll also say in the 8-year period that we've had Authentic, we've gone from a place where, this sort of churn and burn style of fundraising program has actually become less popular than I think people give credit to. It used to be that everybody ran these style of email programs where the only thing they were doing is like shouting from the rooftops that all hope is lost. And if you don't donate now, we're going to take away your Democratic Party membership. And there's actually less of that today than there used to be because the more narrative driven content is resonating, particularly at the higher levels. The reason it doesn't feel that way is that there's a permeation of scam packs that have existed, which for the most part are Democratic consultants who are not able to make the money that they want to make and are not able to get the clients that they want to make, that they want to have. And so they start their own so that they can pay themselves. And so you get a firm or you get an organization set up that has like a bullshit name. And that name is like, Stop Republicans Now or something like that. And then they run this aggressive program and they act like they're raising money for Democrats. What they're really doing is they're spending 60% of their money on an agency that they own to run TV ads that'll never go anywhere. And there's no regulation for the FEC or the FCC and the FEC to stop that right now. And they're not doing anything actionable on it. It happens on the Republican side too. So that's why people don't feel the improvement in the party is because they're being inundated with these scam packs, which is a huge problem in my space.
So I think it might be helpful for us to talk about maybe sort of nitty-gritty specifics of how all this works. For instance, I think while a lot of us feel like we have a sense of how campaign fundraising and marketing works in general, let's say, for instance, your Sherrod Brown comes to you and says, listen, I want to run. I want to get back my Senate seat. With that seat that J.D. Vance now is open because he's vice president. How can you help me, Mike? Well, what happens at that point? What do you tell Sherrod Brown, say?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd be falling out of my seat, excited to do that.
Yeah, me too.
I love Sherrod Brown. I would say a couple of things. Like I'll standardize this a little bit to like how we approach it. I think at the beginning of a program, whether it's one we're inheriting or whether it's one we're starting, there's sort of 2 things we have to do. We have to do a technical audit of every bit of their program, right? What does their social media look like? What does their CRM look like? How big is their email list? Do they have any email deliverability problems like we talked about? We've got to really go into the nitty gritty of that. And my firm is we may be the only firm, I'm not 100% sure about this, that is a full-time like data scientist on staff. And we have a full-time data scientist. They're an amazing human being. They solve the problems that I can't see and they solve them faster than I could ever possibly solve them, right? Because I'm not a data guy by practice. I'm actually more of a communications and a strategic expert. And it allows us to sort of move more quickly and be way more technically proficient than a lot of our competitors. And then the second thing is we've got to do like a tone of voice conversation where we come in and be really thoughtful and intentional about who you are and why you're running and how you want to treat people and how you want to talk to people and why they resonate with you and what are the personal stories that we can sort of get a hold of to imbue the program that we run with a personality that's all of its own, to build you a unique brand identity in a way that makes people look for your emails and look for your text and be excited to get them, which we don't always get right, but we try to. And the more the candidates are willing to give of themselves, the better of a program that we can run. And then we'll start to put the building blocks in place of fixing any technical issues, working backwards with our clients from how much money do you need to win the election, what percentage of it's coming from digital. And then we put together a plan. We say, here's our budget. Here's how much we're going to spend. Here's where we're going to spend it. Here's what our net is going to look like. By the way, for anybody who's looking to run for office, most digital firms do, in my opinion, a pretty poor job of telling you what the net profit is for your digital program. They love to tell you what the gross profit will look like. And it's not the same thing. And anybody who's running a business should know that too. Net profit's more important than gross, frankly. And we, I think, are just very thoughtful and intentional about it. And then I have just this amazing group of people around me, a lot of whom have been with me for a long time, including our new CEO, John Barnes, who's heading up the day-to-day operation of the firm now. But we kind of get in there and start getting to work, and we start churning it out day in and day out.
Can you tell me a little bit about Quiller, what that is, what it does, how it connects with Authentic, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So Quiller is a generative AI program, that software that we have built. And in its initial conception, it was born of a problem that I was really frustrated with, which is the entire Democratic online fundraising ecosystem, including mine to a certain degree, although I think we do it better than most, is predicated on the idea of hiring a lot of very young people who are fresh out of college that are going to help us write fundraising emails. And what ends up happening, and this plays out in other aspects of the Democratic Party, and I'm sure it happens on the Republican side too, is we end up burning through young people. So we get these folks who are fresh out of college, who are passionate about changing the world, who want to figure out their end of the industry so they can move to DC and get a job and get an apartment and live near Capitol Hill. And a lot of folks take these entry-level digital jobs, and then their job is to write like 400 emails a week. And that's an exaggeration, but it's super frustrating because volume is an important part of how you succeed in online fundraising, whether I like it or not. It is unfortunately one of the few levers that I can pull that makes a difference. And I got frustrated with it because a lot of the way that online fundraising is put together is sort of repetitive. So there's a lot of things that we can automate and systematize for people, and help them draft like the first version of something. So with Quiller, what we had to do was we had essentially have, this is a very simplistic view, but we had a robot read thousands of high performing client fundraising emails over the last couple of years and distill and be able to produce emails that were, I think, about as good as an associate coming off the street. It's gotten a lot better now. And the idea is not to replace people in that process. The idea is to give them a quick start, is to say, all right, you've got to send a fundraising email out. There's a rapid response moment for a client. You know roughly what you want it to say. You can now pop in 2-3 inputs. The tool knows enough about how your candidate talks to produce something that's credibly 75, 80, 85% of the way there. And then the last 15% of getting that to a place where you could put it in front of a client, put it in front of the broader target audience, comes from like human creativity and ingenuity, right? So like do that work. So now I can give my team a tool that will make their lives a little bit easier and put them in a position where they're not going to be as burnt out and they can focus on other stuff. And we're doing a lot of other stuff with AI at the company too, to automate the work that we're doing, like with AI agents and stuff like that. But that's a lot of where it started. Now, Quiller has evolved into a broader tool that can help draft many different common content types for campaigns. And so it can draft press releases and op-eds and digital ad copy and tweets and mail pieces and stuff like that. Because the ultimate challenge here is, if you want to run a really good online fundraising program, you can go out and hire Authentic. You can hire one of these other digital agencies that do a good job, but they're really expensive. And if you're running for city council and you think you've got an opportunity to raise a little bit of money online, or you need help writing a press release, but you can't afford a communications consultant, now there's a tool that for $75 a month can help you do all of those things. So the idea here is we're creating a co-pilot in the pocket of every Democratic candidate, every Democratic strategist from top to bottom throughout the party as people get more comfortable with AI.
Do you think, I guess I'm wondering to what extent AI has sort of taken over, infiltrated, become part of this? In other words, when I get, a typical ad that I would get, or usually it's a text from someone or other, to what extent do you think that's likely that was written by a human being at this point, or if it actually was, how big is AI right now, and where do you see it going in campaigning and fundraising?
I think it's going to become a bigger and bigger chunk of the pie of what kind of content we're consuming for everything. There's already evidence that more than 50 to 60% of all the like marketing that you see is AI generated because it's that good at developing content that is imperceptible to the human eye. And that's why when you see all these people that are like, I put this thing into this AI generator that told me whether or not it was AI generated, like those AI tools don't work. ChatGPT had a tool that was helping colleges figure out if students were using their tool to write papers, and it was wildly ineffective, right? I posted this last year, but I put the Declaration of Independence into one of these tools, and it came back out saying that the founding fathers used AI to write the Declaration of Independence. It seems a little problematic to me, would be my guess, but maybe Thomas Jefferson was a time traveler. I don't know. And that would actually be an incredible twist to America, frankly. This my ADHD is going to take over as I start to think about that as a Black Mirror episode or something.
There you go. Yeah, I can see it too.
Yeah. But I think it's going to be more and more. But again, I view AI as a tool. I think it's a scary tool because of what it can do and because of what billionaires like Elon Musk are going to try to do with it, because they're going to try to do all kinds of crazy things. But nobody has ever won a fight with technology, right? There were a ton of people who had spent their whole life learning to build pivot tables and do the type of mathematics that I can do in seconds with Microsoft Excel. And there were people who were career typists who are no longer around doing that work because of personal computers. There were people who drove horse and buggies to get people from here to there, and the automobile destroyed that. So nobody wins a fight with technology. Just nobody does. And so I would rather be one of the people who embraces it at the messiest point of its inception and introduction into this space, so that when other people are ready to catch up and go, okay, I have to change what we're doing because this isn't working, I can be one of the people that can point folks in the right direction because I'll have already made all the mistakes and be able to help and be one of the leaders on that. Because I care deeply about my team, care deeply about our client work, I care deeply about the Democratic Party writ large. And I want to make sure that we don't fall behind, because usually the political space is like anywhere from 5 to 10 years behind traditional marketers, which is another highly problematic issue.
In the intro, I mentioned your connection to Kamala Harris. Can you tell me a little bit about White Dudes for Harris?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, flip a coin, and either you'll find somebody who loved it or you'll find somebody who hated it, which maybe the first time I've experienced that type of polarization anywhere outside of my own marriage. But I mean, look, I worked for Harris for about 5 years, from when she was Attorney General until she joined the Biden ticket in 2020, and was on her presidential race, oversaw and built all of her digital apparatus. I often joke I'm the accidental founder of the K-Hive. So if you've ever got to watch the pro-Congress people on Twitter get mad at somebody, like I may have accidentally created that. And I loved working for Kamala. I thought she was an amazing leader, an amazing human being. I got to spend not a ton of time, but enough time to get a sense of who she was and what her character was and what she valued. And she was super good to me and super good to our staff. And those are the values that I care about. And so when I wasn't working on the presidential race, presidential races are not fun. I'm willing to do one again, but I've got a 5-year-old little boy at home, and I don't really want to upend my entire life for one. And I wasn't doing it, but I wanted to be useful. And I was focused more on my Senate work and my House work and the other clients that I have, because I do a lot of nonprofit work too. And when Kamala became the nominee, when they made that switch from Biden in, what was that, late July? The following week, there was just a series of calls, online hosted calls with, I think the first one was Black women, the next one was Black men, and then white women did one. And progressively, they were getting kind of large. And I was watching it, and I had this idea at home, the week after. I was like, man, I think we should do a White Men for Harris call. I think it's important that white men make it clear that there are a lot of us who support Kamala Harris, who want to be part of the solution, who are uncomfortable with the way that a lot of other white men in this country are talking and the way that their politics are veering, and that we should do something about it. And then I think Thursday night, I was at a fundraiser, and I told somebody I was thinking about doing it, but I was too chicken shit, and I went to bed and I said, I'm not going to do it. And I woke up the Friday morning before we hosted the call to an email from my buddy for Run for Something. And he was like, hey, I'm doing this insane thing. I'm going to start this thing. It's called White Dudes for Harris. Do you want to be a part of it? And I was like, hell yes, I want to be a part of it. Because the minute that somebody else that I respected validated the idea, made me realize that the way I was feeling was right. And then sort of kicked off the most insane, week of my life, basically, because we launched it later that day. I oversaw all the digital for it for the most part. So my job was, I think my official title for White Dudes for Harris was shit poster in chief. So my job was to manage the social media accounts and drum up attention. And like all I did for like 4 days was make memes, like funny memes about white dudes who were supporting Kamala Harris. And I could spend all day telling you about the ones that didn't get approved, because the ones that didn't get approved are my favorite ones. And I'll tell you it right now because it won't matter. But my favorite one that didn't get approved was I used the George W. Bush meme from 9/11 where somebody was whispering in his ear. And the meme was just like, so it's a group of white men and they're all supporting Kamala Harris. And we've never seen anything like this before. And that was like my favorite one. And like people melted down about it, but we decided not to post it. And then we got to Monday for the call, and we had well over 100,000 people on the call, which was the largest call. We raised $4.5 million. It was absolutely crazy. And then, we opened the call we got a bunch of celebrities who wanted to join. It happened super organically. Like the very first guest on the call was Jeff Bridges, the dude himself. And we named it White Dudes for Harris in an homage to the Big Lebowski. And like, I swear to God, 15 minutes before the call, somebody reached out from Jeff Bridges' team and was like, hey, can Jeff join the call? Like, he's going to watch and he wants to be part of the call. And we were like, yeah. And we like put up our whole program. We had him go first. We were like, yeah, there's no way. So it was super fun. And then, like throughout it, the right wing was having a meltdown. Donald Trump Jr. was like tweeting about the call the whole time. And I was tweeting right back and shitposting at him because I'm a jerk and I have no filter. And then we got banned on Twitter that night. Like right afterwards, we were raising all this money, and then all of a sudden, all of our Twitter links were gone. Our account had been shut down. We'd been accused of like spamming. We hadn't done anything that violated the terms. And I posted this very angry, ranty series of tweets because I went from like fired up and energized to super pissed so quickly. And I posted that, and I posted a TikTok, and then I went to bed, and I woke up, and it was the biggest story in the country in the morning. It was like Vanity Fair and Deadline and CNN and New York Times. Was everywhere. It was crazy. I don't even know how it happened, other than my tweet went super viral, and we probably had some PR angels looking out for us. But it was really wild. But I think we did good, and we had a meaningful conversation about men and connection, and the way that too many men have not had community, and how that's led them down a right-wing rabbit hole that has attracted them to the Donald Trumps and Andrew Tates of the world. And I'm really glad we did it. I'm really proud of it.
This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
This episode is brought to you by GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco. Get the most out of your vehicle with GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco original equipment. The only parts designed, engineered, tested, and backed by General Motors. You can find your perfect fit for most makes and models and choose from 3 tiers of parts, including GM OE or gold and silver aftermarket parts. Visit gmparts.com for more information.
And obviously, the final result wasn't what you or what I wanted, or what a lot of folks wanted. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some of those factors, because especially I wanted to get your sense on why you think Democrats decided to rally around Kamala Harris. I mean, despite their having to have known that anyone who was so closely tied to the Biden administration, both with the inflation issues and the questions about mental acuity and all that, would be bringing so much baggage to bear. And not only that, but I mean, Kamala Harris, as nice of a person as she might be, has a reputation for being sort of a mediocre to below average campaigner. And so what was your sense of how that all just sort of materialized?
Yeah. So you have to start with talking about, I think, the original sin of the 2024 election, which was Biden and his team thinking that running for re-election was a good idea. Like, that's just the reality of it. And not enough Democrats are willing to say that right now and just be honest about it. But I will be, because I'm in my, can I drop an F-bomb on here, Michael?
You go right ahead. Drop away.
I'm in the no fucks era of my political career. So I'm pretty mad about what's happening in Washington. I feel the need to just say how I feel when I feel it. So, that was a mistake. And I think a lot of us knew that, and more people should have spoken up. I regret not speaking up. And it's far too many Democrats even today just won't say that, which is ridiculous. But once we got to the point where Biden has the debate and it takes 3 or 4 weeks, however long it was for, I think, Biden and his team to catch up with the reality that he was on pace to lose in an historic, like 1984 style landslide to Donald Trump, which was terrifying. Like the polling numbers I saw were scary. You kind of had a tough decision to make then because we only had a couple weeks until the convention. And so it was either like rally the party quickly around the sitting vice president, who I believe her reputation as a subpar campaigner is ridiculous. I think she's a fine campaigner. I think I'd like to see her do, a little bit more of the like long form podcasting stuff, but I think she did a great job in the 100-day campaign that we had. So I'll push back on that like a little bit, but it would have been like a messier situation to do like an open convention and have a whole messy primary. I'm not sure what was the right call though. I mean, we lost, so I have that as empiric evidence, but I don't know. The truth is, like, I think based on the fundamentals of the economy, the fundamentals of the way that the people feel about the Democratic Party right now, we probably should have lost in a massive landslide. Like we really, I think, should have. And I believe the only reason that we didn't is because, one, Donald Trump is a terrible candidate for president and people do not like him. Like Kamala Harris's favorability numbers were higher than Donald Trump's in the last election. People liked her more. They just were unwilling to continue to elect Democrats in an inflationary crisis, amongst other things they were mad about. And then, I also think that the Harris campaign did, about as good of a job as you could have done with 98 days to run a presidential campaign. Again, it wasn't perfect. I'm not somebody who tells you that it was a perfect campaign. You find a lot of people who will say that it wasn't, but I think it was better than I would have expected it to be with the fundamentals and with the amount of time they had to build a team, if that makes sense. So you could probably convince me that like a quick run convention that produces like a governor, like a Gretchen Whitmer or something like that. You hear a lot of like that. I read a thing about like Obama really wanting that to happen. I don't know if that's true or not. You could convince me that probably works against Trump. But like if they had run Nikki Haley against any Democrat, I think Nikki Haley wins 48 states. Like I do. And because it would have been hard to justify that against like a relatively normal appearing Republican in the position that Democrats were in, where people are pissed as hell about the economy, pissed as hell about the border, and pissed as hell about Biden's age and health and the way the Democratic Party approached that. So it was a tough situation.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that occurs to me, I've talked to a few politicians in my time, and I got to say, most of those interactions have been very underwhelming for me in the sense that when I talk with them or when I just hear most campaign messages from the candidates, whether it's Kamala Harris or so many others, it just feels like this sort of fakey focus group tested committee designed by the book consultant approved thing. And I got to say, with Donald Trump, I don't feel that. I feel this authenticity. I mean, it's a sort of I'll call it a negative authenticity. It's full of anger and victimhood and all that. But I've never felt, well, at least in a long time, a candidate who feels like so emotionally real to me. I guess I sort of felt a little bit of that, like maybe last with maybe someone like John McCain or something like that. But it sure seems to me that Donald Trump intuitively understands something about connecting that someone like maybe Kamala Harris and most politicians don't. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I've coined the term perceived authenticity to describe this phenomenon. And if Donald Trump was a video game character, his perceived authenticity would be like 100% of the bar. We're thinking a character in Diablo or something like that. And it's a tough thing because I think Donald Trump is full of shit. I think that he keenly understands something that I understood very well in the 90s. I continue to understand today, which is pro wrestling characters and being kayfabe.
Yeah.
Kayfabe being, your suspension of disbelief when you're watching a wrestling program that, everything that's happening is real, right? If I go, like WrestleMania was this past weekend, when I was watching WrestleMania, I know I'm watching a show, but I'm pretending like it's real. The same way I do when I watch Breaking Bad or Succession or Yellowstone. And I think Donald Trump understands that. And I think he's gotten a lot of people to understand that whether or not they know it or not, there are a lot of people who are just playing a game. And he plays the game better than anybody else. And way too many Democratic politicians, the majority of Democratic politicians, are very careful, very risk averse, very unwilling to make a mistake. Like today, the day that we're shooting this podcast, Michael, I don't know when this is going to air, but there's an episode of Andrew Schultz's podcast, who's one of the right-wing comedy bros, and Pete Buttigieg is going to be on his show. Those episodes are usually 3 hours long. the number of Democratic politicians that I could drop into the middle of an interview and do 3 hours with a right-wing comedian is very few. Who able to sustain that conversation, navigate it, and effectively argue it. I don't even know if I could do it for 3 hours. I've never done that for 3 hours, at least on a podcast. I've certainly done it at a bar, which might be the ideal way for me to do a podcast with a Guinness in my hand. But it's hard. And Harris's team, the team she had around her, did not feel like she could do like Joe Rogan. And I think that's a mistake because I've seen Kamala be incredibly charming. And I don't think Rogan is a very good interviewer. I think he's a great conversationalist, but we need more of that. And what we need to do is like, one, the Democratic base as a whole, particularly very online liberals on Twitter and Blue Sky, et cetera, whom I love, and I am one of you, need to give more latitude for people to take risks and make mistakes, and to get rid of purity tests. Like, people are going to say the wrong thing, they're going to make a mistake, and we're going to have to give them a lot of grace in the way that the Republicans give Trump a lot of grace. Now, the reverse of that is, I don't want us to like elect the Democratic version of Trump, who is only interested in, getting the right all riled up because that's fun and isn't interesting in actually improving people's lives. That's what makes me nervous about, like, when Stephen A. Smith talks about running for president, right? I don't know what Stephen A. Smith, who's for folks that don't know, is a sports commentator on ESPN, most famous recently for being in a public feud with LeBron James and his son. And I like him as a sports personality. I think he makes the sport, he makes like ESPN more fun. And I worry about us getting hijacked by somebody like that, because we have too many cautious, poll-tested politicians who are unwilling to take a risk, who don't understand that they need to be seen as authentic. Because what people really want is, they want somebody that's going to fight for them. Like, fundamentally, and this is where like I dovetail and I start to agree with Bernie Sanders and his ideology, is like, the system that we live in is not properly functioning. It doesn't work unless you are a very small amount of corrupt billionaires who are siphoning off just an incredible amount of money and wealth and power and influence to themselves and hoarding it for themselves. It's greedy. It's greed. Like, I don't have any problem with success. You should be successful. Like, I'm a successful entrepreneur, but I'm not greedy about it. And these guys are greedy. And that's what bothers me. And so we need to be honest that a healthy society, a healthy economy, a healthy political system does not create the conditions for a man like Donald Trump to be elected once, let alone twice, period. And to get out of that system, we're going to have to get beyond our norms. We're going to have to get past the poll testing. We're going to have to get past the risk aversion, and we're going to have to start leading people to places. And we're going to have to start saying things that are interesting and capturing their attention. And Donald Trump understands that better than anybody else, because he's been playing that game his whole life, because he's a rich kid. His dad was super wealthy. He inherited all of his dad's money when his dad passed away. He's had some success, not as much success as I think he would claim to have, but he's had some success. But he was never accepted into the New York City social circles that he wanted to be a part of. So he went and built his own world and his own reality. And that reality was very media and entertainment driven. And because of that, he understands it. I mean, he once headlined WrestleMania. I think people don't know that. He's a WWE Hall of Famer. This is a man who understands something that I think a lot of like culturally elite, highly educated Democrats who sneer at pro wrestling or sneer at certain types of people or certain types of content just don't understand it. But he's giving voice to a large part of this country that has never felt seen or represented by anybody in the government, let alone Democrat or Republican.
Yeah, I feel like there are some Democrats who seem to sort of are getting this at this point. I look at someone like, say, for instance, John Fetterman, who obviously had a really rough start for medical reasons and so forth. But it seems like he's trying to figure out maybe a way to do a similar-ish sort of thing on the left. And I got to say, while at times me, kind of very highly informed political junkie folk, I kind of roll my eyes at the whole kind of what I think of as the shtick. But then I think, well, I'm not really the audience necessarily for that. And I wonder if too much sort of the professional political class of the Democrats is too enthralled to the consultants, who of course are going to be risk averse and say, well, I'm not going to recommend you do something crazy. Then when you lose, it's on me. And there needs to be more of this kind of taking big swings, like maybe someone like a Fetterman, I would argue maybe less successfully, someone like a Gavin Newsom is trying to do.
Yeah, well, you see all the presidential contenders are playing that game. But to take the part of your question that's about the consultant class, and I would say the consultant class takes a lot of shit, rightly so, by the way. But let's keep in mind, there's like different classes that are also shaping this, which is plenty of people who are working on the Hill plenty of people who are working on campaigns, plenty of people who are working in party committees, et cetera. A lot of whom, by the way, are very good, smart people. I've often framed it this way when I'm having like private conversations with people, is it feels to me like most of the Democratic strategists that I meet are trying to play a game of Moneyball. And if you've ever seen the movie Moneyball with Brad Pitt about the Oakland A's using metrics to win baseball games, one of my favorite movies. And there's a moment when they're trying to recreate Jason Giambi, who was a really good baseball player. And Brad Pitt goes, "You guys are trying to replace Giambi. We can't do that. But what we can do is recreate him in the aggregate." And it feels like everybody's trying to recreate some version of Obama or Reaganism or however you want to put it, or like the weird Democratic strategists that have rosy glasses for George W. Bush, who I frankly personally believe is still the worst president of my lifetime. Although Donald Trump has 3.5 years to disprove me of that notion. Again, we could do a whole podcast on that, Michael, because I remember years of the Bush administration. And I refuse. The most uncomfortable moment of my life was probably when I learned I was going to vote for the same presidential candidate as Dick Cheney. And I didn't know what to do with that. I was like, what am I supposed to do with that information? But we're trying to, I think the real point I'm making is we're trying to win elections of the past with a playbook that Donald Trump has long set on fire, and we have to start winning the next election. And it requires a different type of candidate. We need full-scale generational change at every level of the Democratic Party. We need candidates that are going to communicate viscerally and emotionally and have real stake in this and can talk in very simple terms. Like Donald Trump is incredible at getting his message across. And when you watch he's got these crazy 3-hour rallies, right? They're insane, where he's talking about Hannibal Lecter and, all kinds of other insane stuff. Leftists online focus so much on that, but what you miss is like he's kind of like an aging comedian that's just going through the hits when he's doing that. But he gets the main point of his message across to the broader audience, right? Which is Biden bad, Biden old, economy bad, everything's too expensive. I'm going to get prices down on day one. So his actual core message that you see in paid communication, that you see surrogates do, is very different than like what he does at a rally. I actually thought it was really smart when the Harris team was telling people they should go watch Donald Trump's rallies to see how crazy they are, because most people aren't watching them. Rallies are not for the broader community. Rallies are for diehards. Right? Like regular people weren't going to Kamala Harris rallies either, for the most part. They weren't. And no offense to Kamala Harris, who had some amazing rallies. My wife went to the one in Houston with Beyonce. And those are fine strategies, but like people aren't seeing that. And like Democrats are bad at like, here's my plan and here's how it's going to help you. And it's always, when it's Democrats, it's always, and I might be ranting at this point, Michael. Maybe that's the purpose of the show.
Rant away. Go ahead.
I'm happy to. Like Democrats love to be like, here's my 17-part plan to help you relieve your taxes. All you have to do is file Form 17B on your IRS tax form and blah, 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 blah. And Donald Trump goes, I'm going to cut your taxes. And Donald Trump goes, I'm going to build the wall. Donald Trump's like, I'm going to drain the swamp. I'm going to blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to fix the border. And like, it's just simple, visceral stuff. And you know who else is really good at that? Bernie Sanders. There is a Democratic version, or at least a liberal version of this right now that exists. It's Bernie Sanders going, healthcare for everybody. We're going to raise the minimum wage. It's very simple stuff over and over again. College for all, right? And that was one of the biggest things for Bernie in 2016, which was really smart. And Democrats need to find our version of that, where we keep it simple. And then once we get elected, like, look, Donald Trump is I think, squandering away all the goodwill that they have from the American people. He's underwater on basically every major issue. I've seen him underwater on immigration now, which is wild to me. And we have an opportunity to win people back, but we got to acknowledge our mistakes. And then we've got to start talking to them in a different way with a different style of candidate that resonates with people today, makes them feel hopeful for the future. And then when we get in office, we have to deliver for them fast, with urgency, and where nobody could question what the Democratic Party has done for them lately, except for, people who are just haters online. That's what needs to happen.
Do you think that, well, let me pull back. What we've seen in the Republican Party in the last not quite 10 years is Donald Trump coming in, no one giving him much of a chance at all, totally not listening to consultants or doing things the right way, and basically remaking an entire major political party, an unprecedented, just shocking sort of thing. Now, he might have turned the Republican Party into sort of a personality cult, but, he's won 2 out of the last 3 elections. And the last time, of course, he won the popular vote as well. And I'm wondering if you think that the path forward for Democrats is that we need someone to do something similar. We need our own kind of remaking of the party, even if it is kind of in a personality cult WWE Hall of Fame kind of guy way. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think if Dwayne The Rock Johnson wants to run for president and take over the Democratic Party, I'm probably pretty amenable to that, but only if I get to be a digital guy so that I can run around being like, I am the people's digital director. The 90s kid in me would love that. But anybody who's never watched pro wrestling has no idea what I'm talking about. They know The Rock as the guy from Jumanji. I mean, so, Michael, I'm going to take like a contrarian view on this, which I think would just be different than what you hear from a lot of my contemporaries, which is I actually don't think as much of what Trump does is as unprecedented as people think it. I think some of the differences is that the directions that he takes are horrible and the tone and language that he takes as usual is horrible. But it's not uncommon for the presidential nominee for the president of the United States to reshape the party in their image. Like when Ronald Reagan won in 1980, he changed what the Republican Party looked like. When Barack Obama won in 2008, he changed what the Democratic Party looked like and how it functioned. And so whoever is the nominee 4 years from now, if we elect AOC or somebody from the Bernie wing, that will remake and change the shape of the Democratic Party. If we elect somebody from the establishment wing, like a Cory Booker, if we elect a governor, it will look different and it will change. And I think the Democratic Party did look different under Biden in a way that I think that people don't feel those changes. I mean, the way that they did with Trump, because Trump, Trump appointed, didn't he appoint his daughter-in-law to be the head of the RNC? Just insane to me. And so there's a lot of he pushes the envelope a little bit further, but I think a lot of what he does is actually very precedented. It's very precedented to remake the party in that image. I think what's maybe not as precedent is how committed a very large chunk of the Republican base is to whatever Donald Trump does or says. But I also think that a capable politician like Barack Obama could have also done that. If Barack Obama wanted to go to war with the Democratic Party in 2009 and start primarying Ben Nelson in Nebraska or, somebody that was in his way, he probably could have done that. I'm not sure that's the right thing to do, but it's the same thing as Democrats just love to scream about norms and tell you that, they love to tell you how something is unprecedented. And I just don't buy into that as much. Doesn't mean there aren't horrible, shitty things that are happening, but even Donald Trump sending people to El Salvador, which he should absolutely not be doing without due process, that has happened in American history. Or a president not listening to a Supreme Court ruling has happened before. And Andrew Jackson's done it. Now, the Republican Party isn't fighting them probably the way that the Democratic Party was fighting Andrew Jackson at the time, I would assume. I don't know my history well enough. But my point is he's doing things that have been done before. It just feels different because we've been through this era of decorum, which I think is officially dead. And it's also why, and Governor Tim Walz has made this point quite a bit, when we get back in office, when we elect a Democratic president and take back the Senate and take back the House, which I believe will happen someday. I believe it'll happen in the next 4 years, I hope, if we do our jobs right. People are going to expect that we are going to tackle the things that we care about with the same urgency as Donald Trump. If we get into office and we elect a technocrat that's going to go rebuild USAID and tinker with the Affordable Care Act, we will get killed again by somebody who, frankly, is probably much worse than Donald Trump. So we're going to have to rethink what we're doing 4 years from now and how we're going to deliver for people. And that's another good point to add on top of it is if you go really look into how tyrannical at times FDR was, there's an argument to be made that FDR didn't give a lot of shits about norms. And because of that, he got a lot of stuff done that Americans revere today, that Democrats celebrate today. So a little part of me is what's my version of Trump that's actually going to help people?
I wonder, because there's another narrative that we don't hear as much about around the Democratic Party and the Republicans is that, maybe Democrats and Democratic consultants and pundits are trying to fix what might not actually be broken. Because when you think about what's happened over the last few years, you got post-COVID inflation, which was literally pretty much unprecedented, right? You get Joe Biden's mental acuity issues, I'll call them, and what seems to feel like kind of a cover-up, at least in part. You get Democrats having to renominate somebody with a super short timeline. And so all that considered, it's not like the election went all that poorly. And so when we look to 2028, there are a lot of reasons to feel very confident, at least especially about the House, or 2026 and then 2028. And so maybe we don't need to tinker as much and just recognize that the last election was sort of the confluence of a lot of very weird kind of things, and it might be dangerous to fix what isn't broken. What do you think about that analysis?
I mean, I think that's a mistake. There are large problems that need to be fixed at every layer of society and every layer of the Democratic Party. And I think to not take this loss and try to fix some of those things would be phenomenally reductive and silly to me. Again, I said this earlier, but a functioning society and political system does not elevate someone like Donald Trump to the presidency, who is going to, essentially steal from the American people to make himself a, Russian style oligarch, which is a lot of what he's doing right now. And I kind of hate to talk like that because I feel like that's like, liberals online like always love to talk like that. And sorry, give me a second. I just want to, Michael, I'm going to just take a second because I got kind of flustered. Democrats need to take seriously how people are feeling right now. Like, the profile of a voter that I think about a lot is someone who voted for Obama in 2008, Obama in 12, Clinton in 6, and then voted for Trump in 16, and then voted for Biden in 20, and voted for Trump again in 24. Those voters are real, and they swing elections. And I hear a lot from Democrats like, well, Kamala Harris didn't win because she was a black woman, people are racist, people are sexist, et cetera. Like, there are plenty of people who are racist and sexist. But we have a large swath of people who are just crying out for help, crying out for change, and we're not delivering that change for them. So, no, I think we actually have to fix a lot of stuff. And I think when we take office again, we've got to be tackling major changes to this country, and we've got to communicate it powerfully to people. But we need to be building roads and bridges. We need to be making sure people have health care. We need to tackle income inequality. We need to tackle gun violence in our schools, and we have to do it quickly, urgently, and make people feel that work impact in their lives, and not care if like the right wing loses their mind online about it, or if Republicans in Congress hold a press conference, because they don't care when we do those things. So like, why should we care on the opposite side of it? And frankly, there are more of us than there are of them, period. And I want to see us fix these issues. I want to see us improve the party. I want to see us help people, because ultimately politics should be about the improvement of people's lives. It should not be this petty back and forth. And if Republicans want to help us with that, great, I'm all for it. But right now, the Republican Party doesn't have any plan to help anybody, other than a small group of corrupt billionaires.
It seems to me that one of the big problems with the Democratic Party in its current incarnation is that we seem to have lost our historic connection with working class Americans. That there's that whole thing right now, that the diploma divide, which some people would argue is the single most important divide in politics, where Democrats do really well among college educated voters. But of course, we're in the minority. And so if you lose non-college educated voters by a whole lot more, that is not a sustainable sort of thing. And so I'm wondering, why do you think that happened? Because I feel like consultants can only do so much. I'm sure if you have a candidate who the primary voters decide to elevate, and that person for whatever reason just can't talk to regular working Americans, well, there's only so much you can do with that person. And so I guess I'm wondering where you see the problem lying exactly, and how we as a party start to try to address that.
Yeah, well, the first thing is the Democratic Party needs to admit that there's a problem there, because the number of times I hear people say the Democratic Party is the party of the working class when we lost the working class in the last election, unbelievable to me. And we can't claim to be the party of the working class if they don't vote for us and if we don't deliver for them, period. And so you've got to admit that there's a problem. The second thing is the consulting class in particular, but I think the class of Democratic operatives who run the party from top to bottom, we have not done a good job of elevating people from working class backgrounds, and we have not done a good job elevating people who are in the working class now or have been in the working class recently. We have a lot of people who are college educated and who are very smart, and we need them at the table too, because I don't want to lose these people. I think they're incredibly smart. But we need more people who understand what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck, who understand what it's like to work with their hands, who understand what it's like to do what I think is very noble work, and not to be sneering down at them. And we have way too many Democratic operatives and donors and people in this party who behind closed doors sneer at the working class, sneer at the way they consume content, sneer at the way they live their lives, and have no functional understanding of what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck, to be struggling to put food on the table, to not know if you're going to be able to raise a family and buy a house and retire with dignity. And that bothers me, because I got into politics, the reason I became a Democrat, the reason that I wanted to have a career in politics, the reason I dropped out of college to work for Barack Obama was two things. One, I thought the Iraq war was stupid. I wanted us to get out of it, so I didn't want to do stupid wars. But second, I watched the Bush administration take action after action after action that was hurting working class Americans, that was trying to take away critical government programs that they relied on, like Medicaid. And I want everybody to have a reasonable, credible chance to work hard and succeed in this country. And I don't think enough Democratic operatives are building their communication strategies around how we communicate with working class voters, and they make wide incorrect assumptions because they've never been among them or they don't come from them. Like, I don't come from a wealthy family. My dad was a government worker. He was an FBI agent. My mom stayed at home. I grew up in a nice house in Omaha, Nebraska, but I didn't grow up wealthy. I didn't even really get I'm now college educated, but like I dropped out of college. It took me 10 years to get it. So I just have a very different background than other Democrats. I wasn't poor, to be clear. And my dad wasn't. I wouldn't even put my dad as a working class person, even though he was a law enforcement officer. It's just it's a different perspective. And I think Democrats don't value it enough. And I think in addition to that, this plays out in so many different ways. We are not communicating at all with large swaths of the electorate. And I think working class Americans are part of that. I think rural Americans are part of that. I think, and there's obviously a ton of overlap here, but I also think like men, white men in particular, and young men in particular, we're not communicating with them. And there's this idea that like we are making our argument and the Republicans are making their argument and that people are deciding, and that's horseshit. Like that isn't what's happening. Democrats aren't showing up in these spaces. There are large parts of this country who exclusively get their news about Democrats from Republicans because they haven't seen a Democrat come to their town in their lifetime. Whether it be a local Democrat who's willing to say, hey, I'm so-and-so and I'm running to be your state senator, or somebody who's willing to just like be a presidential candidate and go to a small town and have that conversation, or go on a show that a lot of people in the Democratic Party think is beneath them. We have to change that because we're not letting our argument be heard. And that frustrates me greatly. And in the same vein of that, and let me know if I'm just heading into rambling territory, because I could probably talk about this all day. In the particular case of, if you look at the places where Democrats had erosions in this last election, the erosions that cost us this election, we lost ground with young black men. We lost ground with men, period. But I'm going to focus exclusively on young people for a second. We lost ground with young Gen Z men, and it was across all demographics. So it was white men, it was black men, it was brown men, etc. We lost that ground. Well, a big part of the reason we lost that ground is that this is the first generation of young men who are going to make less money than their female counterparts, probably in the history of the world. Young men right now are significantly less likely to graduate from college. They're significantly less likely to buy a home. The system as it's in place isn't working for them. And then the only people who are talking to them are Republicans, because Democrats don't talk to them in a meaningful way, don't offer them anything, don't advocate for them. So it makes sense that they would turn against them. It does. And again, we shouldn't do anything to impede the progress that we're seeing in elevating women in society. Like, it's incredible that women are going to make more than men under 30. Like, that's amazing. That's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But if we don't communicate with people, we're going to lose too many of them. And that's how we lose these elections. Does that make sense, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you kind of pull back and take a look at the near-term landscape, I think we're roughly 18 months out from the midterms, right? And so when you kind of take a look at that overall landscape, how well positioned do you feel Democrats are, and what would you see as sort of the biggest, most significant headwinds and tailwinds for the party?
So I think we're well positioned for the midterms, mostly because this administration does not understand why Donald Trump won this election, and Donald Trump doesn't seem interested in doing anything that's going to help people put food on the table, grow their wages, any of that. Everything that he's doing is creating economic chaos, manipulating the stock market, putting money in everybody's pockets, or nobody's pockets except for his and his friends. And so that is, I think, the reason that I would put us probably as the favorites to win the House. Now, I don't want to get overconfident. There's a lot of work that has to be done. We have to run good candidates. We have to build infrastructure. We have to do the work and not make the same mistakes in the past. But I think we're well positioned for it. I also know that the broader instinct of the American public is that divided government is good. And that has been true my entire career. I have no reason to believe it's not true today. Like, people tend to immediately want to go back to divided government once they've had one party rule. I think that's actually a terrible instinct of the American public, but I respect them for it. So I think in this case, that'll probably benefit us. The Senate will be harder only because the map is very challenging in this election. We really only have two credible opportunities for what would be called like a tier one pickup opportunity. So North Carolina and Maine are the two states where we would be best positioned to flip those Senate seats. And then, we'd have to take a real confluence of events to win something like Iowa or Alaska or Texas in this environment. Again, very possible. If it's like a D+8 election and we run great candidates, like a great candidate in the right state can gain you 2, 3, 4 points in a race. And Republicans are also like running primary challenges, like Susan Collins has a primary challenge in Maine. Tom Tillis has a primary challenge from the right in North Carolina. The lieutenant governor of Texas is primary challenging the sitting senator right now, and the lieutenant governor of Texas is a lunatic. And I think like there's a lot of potential opportunity where Democrats could run a pretty damn good candidate in a very pro-democratic electorate, and Republicans run a bad candidate and we win something we have no business winning. That happens all the time. It's happened before. And it's how we had, like everybody loves to make fun of Joe Manchin on the Democratic side, but like I can't have a Democratic Senate without a Joe Manchin in West Virginia. As much as he makes me want to pull my hair out some days, I miss him. Joe Manchin's in the Senate right now. Pete Hegseth is not the Secretary of Defense. That's the difference that a Senate seat makes. So like, again, we need to probably stop playing the purity politics and allow for us to have a Joe Manchin in the tent, even if he pisses us off. Same thing with like people wanting to run Fetterman out of the party. Like Fetterman's voting with us like 92% of the time. He said it himself. He would make a terrible Republican. Now he's taken stances on some things that like I can't understand and don't agree with. But like, again, he's largely with us when we need him in the biggest moments. And that is what I need in my Democratic senators. So, but again, go ahead, Michael.
We're focusing a lot on the Senate, and I think for good reason, because it's really, we're both old enough to have had an experience of a filibuster-proof Democratic Senate majority, which seems bizarre nowadays to even wrap my head around. But that was the case in 2009. That's how we got what I would argue to be the most important and consequential legislation, perhaps in my lifetime, the Affordable Care Act passed. And when I look at the map now, I struggle just to find a way where Democrats can even potentially get a, I mean, things have to get pretty weird for us to even have a majority in the Senate, let alone 60 seats. And I guess I'm wondering, when you look at this, you're looking at the same map that I am. Do you see a path forward for Democrats to sort of redesign ourselves in such a way where we could plausibly say, well, yeah, we could possibly get 60 seats at some point? I don't see it.
I mean, it's hard to see it. But I'll also say that the electorate has a tendency to reset itself every certain, number of years. So keep in mind that like we may be in the end of a particular era right now, and the era is going to go out in a bang. And if you talk to a lot of Democratic strategists, they would say, like in 2008, there were a lot of people that were like, this ascending coalition for Barack Obama is going to deliver us presidential victories. We'll never elect another Republican president for 20 years. So many people said that. There's so many articles written by your favorite online influencer saying that, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I was like 18 at the time. I don't even remember if I believed that at the time, but if I did, it was naivete. So like Republicans do that right now. Like they believe Donald Trump will be elected president forever. And they think like JD Vance is going to keep that coalition together, or whatever guy they put up in 4 years. Like, I don't know. I think the electorate might reset itself, and especially if the next election is like they run JD Vance versus like, a Pete Buttigieg, who's in my opinion, probably one of, if not the best communicators on the Democratic Party side right now. And we take our communication strategy very differently. We bring our message to where it needs to go. And the economy is in bad shape, and people are frustrated with, other aspects of Donald Trump's agenda. Like, Bob's your uncle. There's plenty of opportunities. If we run the right candidates, we take risks. And the other thing too, is that, and this is an example, we talked about how presidential candidates or presidents remake their parties. In the Obama era, Barack Obama and his team made a decision to gut state Democratic parties and to stop investing in states with which we didn't have as good a chance to win their electoral college votes in 2012. And it has been 10 years or more, no more now, of trying to undo that decision so that we can have a strong Democratic Party in every state and a strong candidate in every state that's trying to win these races, because flukes happen all the time. All right. Ted Kennedy dies. They elected Scott Brown. All right. Alabama, we elected Doug Jones. Weird stuff happens. It does. And it still happens now. And I think that people kind of forget that. And that's why you need to play as opportunistic as possible. Keep your head on a swivel, be competing for as much as you can. We could win a Senate seat in Nebraska this year with an independent candidate that I'm excited about, because Pete Ricketts, who's the incumbent Republican, is that bad of a senator. So there's opportunities here.
And so when you look at that landscape and the opportunities and just in general, what is it that you can point to so we can close on as optimistic a note as possible? Because I got to say, the last 3 months or so have been brutal. But what do you see that gives you the most cause for optimism in the near term? It can be tough, right, to feel optimistic right now. Sorry, but
no, I mean, but I'm a pretty optimistic guy. Like, and I'll just tell you from a very top level perspective. Like, when Trump got elected the first time, I was a miserable person those 4 years. I was, and there was a lot of reasons for that had nothing to do with Donald Trump. But I, allowed what was happening in the country to take away from my joy and my ability to enjoy my family and my life and the people around me. And like, I'm not doing that again this time. Like, I will take Kamala Harris's advice, and I will be a joyful warrior until they put me in the ground. For no matter what happens, I will be a joyful warrior, and I'm going to do that. So, but if I would say that the things that give me optimism, and then I'm also just going to leave on like a advice I would give your listener, and maybe you, Mike, it's useful. The causes for optimism I see is that, one, I think the size and scale of the protest movement that we're seeing across the country is growing every single time they do it. And it feels like there's real energy and momentum to it. And it feels different than what happened in when Trump was elected in 2017, where it was like a lot of really big protests right away. And then it kind of fizzled after that. This feels like it's a much more sustained thing. And as things continue to get worse, it could get even bigger. And when you're dealing with authoritarians like Donald Trump and his team, making them have the fear of God in their opponents, in like the popular, making them worried about what's going to happen electorally and worried about what's going to happen if they anger the mob, essentially, I think is an important part of keeping them in check. So that's number one. Number two is I am slowly but surely watching the Democratic Party transform into a party that I think understands the stakes in front of us. And you see that with the huge win in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race that Ben Wickler and the Wisconsin Democratic Party delivered for us. You see that in Cory Booker's historic filibuster. You see that with AOC and Bernie going on tour. You see that with Chris Van Hollen flying to El Salvador to go check on Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the man they were wrongly imprisoning in an El Salvadorian prison. So like, I'm seeing a Democratic Party that is imperfect and needs to get a lot better. It needs to get a lot tougher, but is figuring it out. And I think I'm eager for the like ideological and like style battle of 2028 primaries so that I can kind of see where it shakes out, which I'm sure I'll be a part of one way or another, because I have lots of clients that will probably think about doing it. The piece of advice I want to give people that keeps me sane and keeps me optimistic is my dad, when I was a kid, he would say, and my dad's a big Republican, he voted for Trump multiple times. And he would say that my responsibility in life is just for me and my people. My job is to take care of my family, which is a very like, conservative idea, right? I don't have an obligation to my community. I don't have an obligation. As a kid, I thought it was really selfish. As an adult, I have like a very different view of it, because I actually think my dad is right. And I think what I've observed is, at least I'll tell you about the way I live my life. So like you think about it like concentric circles. In the middle of the concentric circle is me. I have to take care of myself physically, mentally, spiritually, on every level, so that I can be of most value to the people in my life. And then my next responsibility is to make sure that I'm taking care of my family. So my wife and my son and my immediate family, and then my community, and then my country, and then the world, right? What I find with a lot of the liberals that I know, and a lot of the way I experience a lot of the liberals online, is they care so much about the world and the broader geopolitical landscape that they forget to take care of themselves, they forget to take care of their families, and they forget to take care of your community. So if you're frustrated with what's happening right now in Washington, something that frankly you can't control, you can show up to protest, and we need you to keep doing that, and you can keep volunteering for candidates to try to get them elected. We need you to keep doing that. But you can't immediately stop Donald Trump from doing something horrible today, like whatever, jackassery that they've been doing while you and I have been on this podcast for an hour. I can't stop a lot of that today, and I'm probably closer to being able to than some other people. But what you can do is find your version of how to improve your community. You can raise your kids right. You can spend more time with them. I'm doing a trash pickup in my neighborhood this weekend with my son. We're going to go clean up trash in the parks. You can improve your community one little step at a time, and you can at least find some measure of joy, value, and satisfaction. And if more people did that, if more people cared about what was right in front of them in their neighborhood, in their community, then the country would be better off, period. In big cities and small towns, rich, poor, it doesn't matter. More people need to work on what's right in front of them and spend a little bit less time worried about the global stuff. Doesn't mean it's not important. I'm not telling you to bury your head in the sand. Like, I want you to stay engaged, but you'll feel better if you get your hands dirty in your town. And that's what's keeping me sane right now. Like, Chicago has these local school councils, and there's a school down the street from me that needs a lot of work, a public school that my son doesn't go to it, but that needs a lot of work. They need help fixing the roof, and they need help figuring out how to get all the kindergartners out for recess. They need help figuring out how to make sure that they have an engineer on staff that can fix all the stuff that they got and that they can afford to do it. And like, I joined that as a community member, and I'm helping them do that like once a month. And that's maybe more meaningful than anything else I do at work. And that keeps me sane, because I know that there are good people who are trying to make my community better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fantastic advice and a great place to close on that. So with that, we will close. Mike Nellis, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Of course. Thanks, Michael. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to this Politics Guys interview. If you want to get in touch with us for any reason, you can do that in a bunch of ways. There's email, mail@politicsguys.com, as well as Facebook or X. Links for those are in the show notes. There's also our Discord discussion forums for supporters, which I am on all the time, probably too much. No. But anyway, if you're not already a supporter, I hope you'll consider becoming one. When you become a supporter, you not only help us continue the work that we're doing, but you get ad-free versions of everything we release, as well as the full-length midweek episode, as opposed to just that 15 or so minute preview. And if you'd like to get that full-length midweek episode, but you're not in a position to financially support us right now, not a problem. Send me an email, mike@politicsguys.com, and I will get that set up for you. And whether you're a supporter or not, it really does help us out if you subscribe, rate, and review us on whatever podcast app you use, as well as sharing episodes on social media. And finally, a very special thanks to our executive producers, Wilma Moreno, Daniel Toe, Ryan Beasley, Don Oglesby, Derek Schmidt, Dakota Heath, Jason Chrysler, Dave Dean, Jeremy Larson, and Brian Matza.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,